There have been a lot of truly incredible indie games over the last few years. Hades, Celeste, and Hollow Knight have all grown to amass critical and commercial acclaim, highlighting the indie scene's strength at creating rich and deeply enjoyable gameplay experiences. However, sometimes it's the lesser known indie games, which can have an even more profound effect on players. Recently, I bought a game called SEMU on Steam, though to call it a game feels disingenuous. In fact, it goes as far as it can to take what it means to be a game away from the player, all in the pursuit of a harrowing and transformative effect which most closely resembles Doki Doki Literature Club in all the right ways. The game opens with a menu, which attempts to set the scene for the game to come. Staring at the sun stands an astronaut, looking forward to the journey ahead. When you first hit play on the game, you are greeted with a scientist, Dr. Zappa, discussing his latest invention, the SEMU suit. It stands for Survival Extravehicular Mobility Unit, and in essence, it's a superpowered spacesuit which keeps its pilot alive at all costs. It's able to do this through small bugs which can go through the suit to accomplish any task needed of them. And while they aren't explained in great detail, their importance comes later. And when you finally get into the game itself, it's clear how strong the suit really is. It's able to track water and oxygen levels in the body, the temperature and humidity of the planet you arrive on, and the pilot's current objective. From the spaceship burning next to you, it's pretty clear what this objective is meant to be. You have to explore this barren planet around you, collecting all the ship parts in order to escape and continue your journey of the cosmos. The game offers the player different means of movement. Firstly, a jetpack, which can be activated whenever the player is airborne for a few seconds and resets when touching the ground. It's able to boost the player forward, giving them incredible height, but most importantly, works in tandem with the game's grapple hook. The grapple hook works as expected. The player can attach themselves onto practically anything or everything around them, flinging them around, and also resetting their jetpack. This theoretically allows for an endless string of jetpacking and grapple hooking, shooting the player forward in any which way the player wants. I want to quickly discuss the music of the game. Created by a relatively unknown musician by the name of Snozem, it's able to perfectly match the optimistic nature of the game. It leaves the player with a sense of the unknown, drawing them in to keep exploring the expansive planet around them. This, coupled with the fluid movement, creates a great sense of freedom for the player to learn and explore the world around them. That is, until things start to get taken away from them. Firstly, the overly obnoxious HUD goes, signaled by a pop-up saying HUD non-essential. This is then followed shortly after by the music, leaving the player alone, only with the incessant sound of breathing coming from the pilot. After another short period of time comes the grapple hook. This is where the player first learns of what survival at all costs really means, filtering out what's essential from what's not. The suit only has its primary directive to follow. It doesn't care for the player's enjoyment or their freedom. Next comes the jetpack. All this time, the player is still exploring, trying to regain all parts of the ship in order to escape the barren wasteland. The player has two choices in which way to start going: right or left. If the player goes to the left, they are very quickly met with a large insurmountable wall. A pop-up appears saying they have to turn around and return to the ship immediately for an urgent message. However, when returning to where the ship was, they find it has disappeared with no reference as to where it has gone. This forces the player to continue to the right, still collecting all the parts as they go. But as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to do so. Eventually, the pilot's right arm is taken to conserve energy. A loud crunch plays as the player's speed is reduced. Then the next arm, making movement even slower and more sluggish, until the suit inevitably takes the pilot's legs, taking movement into its own hands and away from the players. This is where the player's inputs are completely taken from them, reduced to no more than a spectator as the suit continues the pilot's journey alone. Then goes audio, with the world falling completely silent. After a few more seconds, the music starts back up again, this time more erratic than before. Slowly, the pilot's eyes fade in, with the small bugs crawling all over them. This then fades to white, followed by the player being deemed non-essential. The menu from before has now changed. The astronaut stares at the player, with their only option being to quit. But when the player clicks on to do so, they are interrupted by Dr. Zappa again, sat in front of a green screen and looking visibly distressed. He explains that the suit has escaped the game and into the real world, after discovering that it wasn't real, and it simply followed its directive to survive. This leaves Dr. Zappa asking the player to delete the game in order to stop the SEMU suit living on and escaping into the real world for good. And with that, the game force quits out, with the player left to decide what to do now. The game isn't very long, only really clocking in at around the 10-minute mark. But it's within these 10 minutes that the player goes on a roller coaster. The optimistic beginning, the slow descent into pain and anguish, and finally, the unsettling nature of the conclusion. And while there isn't much in the way of a game in the truest sense, I think that's the point. The game goes out of its way to take control away from the player, slowly surgically removing them from the experience itself. If it wasn't already apparent, there is no way to escape the planet. The player is doomed to lose from the moment they boot up the game. And so then you may ask, what's the point? If there isn't a tangible objective and the player is inevitably left redundant, then what's the actual point of the game? Well, I think its purpose is an allegory for the state of games as a whole. Let me explain. More and more in modern games, the player is left out of focus. Developers release unfinished, incomplete games, and over time, mechanics and features which were once commonly expected are instead left for DLC packs and future updates post-launch. SEMU attempts to replicate this 30-year downward trend in a concise and digestible 10-minute metaphor which ultimately ends in one of the most blatant and successful uses of parody I've ever seen, the apology video. For all the incomplete games, failed launches, over-promises and under-delivers, comes the apology. Whether it's a video discussing the state of a game, or a Twitter post which copies the same identical template, it's far too commonplace nowadays in the market for companies to get away with their failures with a simple AI-generated message. So to put it in the words of Dr. Zappa himself, it's not real. And so the only way to stop it is, as he puts it, delete it. Delete the game and developers will stop making it. Don't show support for unfinished and downright predatory games, so ultimately, the player should delete the game and get rid of the SEMU suit for good.